In this lecture, we're going to review some important key terms and concepts that will help us over the next couple of months as we learn to read literature and film through a gender lens. Our first key term is patriarchy. Patriarchy is a social system in which males hold primary power. Males predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. And in the domain of the family, fathers or father figures hold authority over women and children. So you might find examples of patriarchy in figures, important cultural, political, and social figures in society. For the family, you might think of the traditional male breadwinner, the father of the household, the patriarch of the family. You might think of the sort of political leaders, military leaders, men who founded the nation, or you might think of sort of moral authorities, religious leaders. So these are all sort of men who hold power and authority within any given society. This would be evidence of patriarchal social structures. I think there is a bit of a misconception about how we use the term patriarchy, though. A lot of students will have this idea that if we recognize our society as a patriarchy, the only way to undermine it or challenge it would be to reverse that and say, well, what's the alternative of matriarchy? I think in reality, to challenge patriarchy, to recognize patriarchy, is to move towards a more equality, equal society, equal relationships between men and women and children. So I think we have to move away from the idea that if we recognize society as patriarchal, we are somehow attacking men, wanting to subordinate them. That's not true. So I want us to sort of reinvent or renew our perception of what patriarchal society is. So one way that we can define or look at patriarchy from a new perspective is to follow along with what Alan G. Johnson identifies. So he's saying in this essay, Patriarchy, the System, he's saying it's not about attacking men. It's about recognizing that patriarchy is one type of social organization. It is the dominant one, but it is equally about the disparity of power and privilege amongst men and women as it is between men and other men. So he's saying that it's in both interests of men and women to challenge, disrupt, and create a new social system that is not patriarchal. So just quoting Johnson here, so Johnson characterizes patriarchy as a type of social organization that is structured around the unequal distribution of power, not only in relationships between men and women, but among men as they compete and struggle to gain status, maintain control, and protect themselves from what other men might do to them. So in other words, Johnson is saying that patriarchy not only hurts and creates inequalities between men and women, but also between men themselves. So it would be in everybody's best interest if we challenged patriarchal social structures. Our second key term, our concept, is this idea of masculinities. And you'll notice that I pluralized the term masculinities, right? So we're not just talking about one singular expression of gender. So I'm following along with critic R.W. Connell, who identifies how across time, across cultures, and even within our society, depending on the context, so whether you're at school, at home, at the workplace, there are as many different understandings and different ways of defining masculinity across time and cultures. So there's not one single way to do or perform masculinity. That's why we pluralize it, so we add the S and acknowledge that there is more than one way to do one's gender. According to Connell, some types of masculinities are more valued and honored than others. Some types or performances of masculinity are devalued, marginalized, and disempowered. For example, she Connell points out how certain types of masculinity are taken as esteemed and valued within our culture. For example, you might think of how sports heroes are valued and celebrated. When I was young, my brothers would have posters of Michael Jordan on their bedroom walls or Wayne Gretzky. So these were the sort of men in culture who they wanted to emulate and who they looked up to. So they understood masculine identity in relation to these kind of sports idols or heroes. In another generation, young boys would have looked up to soldiers as representing a kind of idealized or exemplary form of masculinity. At the same time, there are some masculinities that are devalued, marginalized, and disempowered. For example, homosexual masculinities and ethnic minority masculinities are traditionally not valued in or highly regarded or empowered in the same ways as other types of masculinity. Although we could see across time, across cultures, and even in within society, there is a lot of variation about how masculinity has been performed, what is considered the dominant forms of that era. So there's not one singular definition of masculinity. When we think about gender, it is fluid, it is plural, it is changing. So there's not just one type of way to perform, do one's gender. At the same time, there is what we call hegemonic forms of masculinity. Hegemonic refers to the dominant, the most highly visible, most highly esteemed form, the culturally dominant expression of gender that exists. Not saying that it's the most common, but it's the most sort of widely represented in media and culturally esteemed. So that is what hegemonic refers to. So the hegemonic masculinity that is most visible, most associated with authority and leadership. This is the type of masculinity that is kind of in Western culture represented in the media, and we think about it when we think of, that sort of conventional manliness as it is represented in film and television. So, for example, this is just a kind of silly example, but we have an advertisement for a bodybuilding exercise system. Charles Atlas here is kind of shown to be, there's even a little reward there, the world's most perfectly developed man, right? So he becomes a kind of model, an exemplary, idealized representation of the hegemonic form of masculinity. And in the comic strip, we have this 97-pound weakling being bullied, and then eventually he is able to transform his body and be the hero of the beach. So we, in our culture, sort of associate, being heroic, getting the girl, being dominant, powerful, and having certain privileges go along with conforming to this hegemonic masculinity. So the gender structures of our society define certain patterns of behavior as masculine and other patterns of behavior as feminine. What is important to remember, however, is that these certain qualities or patterns are not ingrained, are not innate, are not biological. They are rather what we call social constructions of gender, meaning that they are learned behaviors that we are taught to us as we are children and as we grow up. These are the behaviors that are reinforced through media, through role models, and that are rewarded if we conform to these qualities, right? So they make up the sort of hegemonic qualities of gender identity. So for men to be masculine, our culture currently associates masculinity with strength, both physical and a kind of mental or emotional strength as well. So you think about muscles, but you also think about sort of a strong will, being hard, tough, enduring, courageous, all those kind of qualities that we associate with masculinity. There's also a kind of aggressive, even violent strand of masculinity that is being promoted. We'll look at some examples in a minute, but strong, strength, physical prowess also is shown to be valued as aggressive, violent behavior in men. So part of this is also related to how men have been represented in media, through film and TV and video games, that type of thing. So we'll look at some examples in a minute. And then the last trait that is sort of associated with hegemonic masculinity is stoicism. So in other words, that would be like a lack of emotion, lack of sensitivity, almost like an emotional detachment. So you're not showing or expressing any sense of feelings. And we'll notice that on the other side, so how femininity is affirmed or represented in our culture, they're just all opposites, right? So femininity in our society is defined by its opposition to whatever is labeled as masculine. So weakness, passivity, gentleness, nurturing, caring, all that kind of maternal behaviors, I guess, emotional qualities. Our culture associates these qualities with being feminine, and we like to keep a very sort of clear line between masculinity and femininity, right? If you blur these lines, there can be some repercussions. So what we're talking about here are social constructions, though. So we have to remember that these are learned behaviors. They are taught to us. They're not ingrained. They're not innate. Some people, you might say parts of them are based on maybe hormones or something innate or biological, but for the most part, we can look at gender as a social construction a learned behavior or pattern of behavior that is reinforced and subtly rewarded in our society if one conforms to them.